My sister berated her daughter's boyfriend for being poor until she realized his grandfather owned the venue they were getting married in. My niece Lauren had been dating her boyfriend William for 3 years. He was the only guy her mom never approved of. Also the only guy who never cheated on her or used her for money. Janet was always subtle about her dislike for William, but she just presumed eventually they'd break up, so she never said much. Well, they didn't. And that's why everything came crashing down at the wedding rehearsal. It all started when William showed up in his dented Nissan. He jumped out with a huge smile and rushed around to open Lauren's door and offered her his arm. They seemed so happy, but both their faces dropped the second they saw Janet looking at them. Her face was already dark, and when they walked up to greet her, she stiffened up. She wiped her hands after shaking William's, and when he walked away, she zeroed in on him like a hawk. Before he could even make conversation with anyone, she approached him with that two-faced smile and loudly asked if his suit was from Goodwill because she recognized their tags. William didn't react to her comments. He just smiled and mentioned he enjoyed thrift shopping for environmental reasons. That seemed to make Janet angrier because she turned to her son and snarkily whispered, "I hate when the lower class try to fit in." I jumped to defend him, saying that he looked perfectly nice, and she immediately turned to me with that sharp look to say, "Isn't your house payment coming up?" My stomach dropped. My husband had left me with $400,000 in gambling debts I never knew existed, and she'd been helping with monthly payments ever since. The debt hadn't decreased much, still hovering around $400,000 because her payments mostly covered interest. She loved hanging it over my head, so I just swallowed my pride and went back to the party and prayed Janet wouldn't say anything else. But during cocktails, she escalated. She questioned William's consulting work and implied that's what everyone says when they're between jobs. William said that he could provide for Lauren and she didn't need to worry, but Janet scoffed and said she couldn't trust his word because of his appearance. Lauren told her mom to stop being rude, but she continued, saying that she was just looking out for her and brought up Lauren's ex, who used to hit her. She said he worked at a top lawyer firm, and William needed to be more like him. Lauren said she was happy with him, but Janet started going on a rant about her needing financial security, all while glancing at me. I just scarfed my food down and bit my tongue, hoping she would stop at that. But at dinner, Janet placed William at the far end with the plus ones. When Lauren protested, Janet said family sits together, and he wasn't family. I jumped in before I could stop myself to say that they've been together for 3 years, and that made him family. Janet smiled and said, "3 years. Wasn't that how long your husband hid his gambling?" I shut up after that again, but I hated seeing how defeated Lauren looked all throughout dinner. The worst part came after dessert. Janet pulled Lauren into the coat room. I followed and heard everything. Janet threatened to cut off Lauren's student loans and the promised house down payment if she brought William to the wedding. She said, "If you want to marry poor, then you can live poor." She pointed me out as an example of marrying for love and ending up begging for money. Lauren sobbed and ran out. Her and William left right after. I didn't see William until the next morning at the venue. I was helping with the flowers when the coordinator suddenly looked panicked, telling me the owner had shown up and he never came to events. Janet overheard and assumed there was a problem, and instantly marched outside and I followed. In the garden we saw William talking to the owner, an elderly man. Janet stormed over and told the old man this was a private event, and William wasn't on the guest list. The old man looked at her calmly. "I know. I'm wondering why my grandson was removed from it." Janet's face went through several expressions. First confusion, then pure horror as she realized what was happening. William was the grandson of the man who owned this whole place. He could buy her 100 times over, and he was looking at her like he wanted to, purely out of pettiness. The old man turned to William and asked if this was the woman who'd been causing problems. William just nodded. Janet started stammering and trying to backtrack. She said there must have been some misunderstanding and that William was absolutely welcome. The old man wasn't having it. He told Janet he'd heard about the rehearsal dinner from William. He knew about the Goodwill comments and the seating arrangement. Janet's face went white. She tried to explain that she was just being protective of her daughter. The old man cut her off and said being protective didn't mean being cruel. He walked over to me and introduced himself as Theodore. He asked if I was the aunt Janet had been using as an example of failure. I nodded, too shocked to speak. Theodore patted my shoulder and said not to worry about it. Then he dropped a bomb. He told Janet that the venue was no longer available for the wedding. Janet's jaw dropped. She started begging and saying the wedding was tomorrow. Theodore shrugged and said she should have thought about that before insulting his family. Janet turned to William and started apologizing profusely. She said she didn't know who he was and that she was sorry. William just looked at her and said that was the problem. She only cared now that she knew he had money. Theodore told Janet she had 1 hour to clear out all the decorations. Then he walked away with William following. Janet stood there frozen for a minute. Then she snapped into action and started screaming at me. She blamed me for not telling her who William really was. I told her I had no idea either. She didn't believe me and said I must have known something. I walked away while she was still ranting. Inside, the wedding coordinator was already packing things up. Other vendors were arriving and being turned away. Janet was on her phone frantically calling other venues. None were available on such short notice. Lauren arrived an hour later.